Welcome to the Lane Gorman Trubit Harvesting the Future webinar series. This 5-part series will cover a wide range of topics that will help you in 2021 and beyond. Employee relations, budget changes, and retirement plans are all a key part of your business. This series will help you understand what changes you might need to make for the future. CoAdvantage presents a human resources presentation on recruiting, retention, and engagement. This webinar will teach you the important tips on how to retain your employees, recruit diverse new workers, and motivate your staff. It was recorded live as a Zoom webinar on September 17, 2020, and all information was accurate and up to date at that time. There's a Q&A at the end, but if you have questions, please feel free to email us at askus@lgt-cpa.com.
Good afternoon. It is 3 o'clock on the dot. So we're going to go ahead and get started and allow a few people to join. I see some familiar faces and some new ones. So for those of you who have not attended a webinar before, I'm Katie Lyles, the Events and Marketing Coordinator here at Lane Gorman Trubit. Lane Gorman Trubit is a mid-size accounting firm for all business sizes, and in 2020, LGT will be providing you with endless opportunities for gaining CPE credit. Our events have topics relating to auto, construction, healthcare, manufacturing, distribution, not-for-profit, and real estate. If you have any questions about this or any of our services, or would like to set up a free consultation to determine how we can help your business grow and thrive, please feel free to email us at askus@lgt-cpa.com, and we will get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reza. I'm with CoAdvantage. We are one of the largest PEOs nationwide. And one of the topics that we are going to cover today, actually 3 topics: recruiting, retention, and employees engagement. That's what we do for a living. With me today is Justine Carroll, who is basically HR consultant with CoAdvantage. And she's going to walk you through basically these 3 top subjects and topics. And feel free to send questions you might have to her or to myself, and we would be happy to answer them for you. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Justine for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reza. Thank you everyone for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about employee acquisition. So when you talk about this topic, it's really a loaded topic to discuss, because it's not just getting the employee, it's how do you keep the employee? How do you make them want to be there? How do you retain them and want them to become a part of your organization and become a part of a bigger, greater team that you may be building at your organization? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Just so you know, this organization, this seminar has not been provided by attorneys, so it is done in conjunction with our regulatory and compliance group. So it is not a substitute for talking to legal counsel, but I will tell you that I have over 22 years of experience with human resources. I am a regional human resources advisor, and I've been doing this for a long time. And I've definitely seen some changes as the culture this year with 2020 has been evolving. Obviously, 2020 been a very crazy year for everyone in a lot of different areas. But I particularly are seeing some changes here with this typical pie chart that we see: the attracting the quality talent, the engaging them once you have them, and then keeping them after you've done all that training. These are the big 3, right? We've seen these about 1 million times. We've seen all these different strategies for them. The basic microcosm that we're seeing in work is that things are changing very rapidly now. There's a lot of things that used to work in the past. The way you would recruit and attract talent don't work anymore. And so we have to become different thinkers. We have to think out of the box. And I know a lot of people hear that term and they think, oh, think out of the box. What does that mean? That's just such a vague term. I think it means disrupting the way that you think and the way that you have been doing things, and taking a chance and doing something different. So we're going to talk about what that disruption looks like a little bit later in the presentation, but I think it's a good word to be thinking about, because oftentimes people think, oh, disruption, that's a bad thing. Not always. When it comes to attracting quality talent, engaging that talent, and retaining those individuals, you really need to start thinking differently. The old ways do not work. So the numbers that we're talking about are crazy right now, right? We've seen a lot of different, we've all seen the headlines that talk about how many people are out of work and what claims are being processed, the total people that are unemployed at this time. It's a lot of people. So I guess I should say logic says that you've got a lot of people that are out there that could be your potential employees. Basically what you're seeing in the market right now is employees, I guess I should say positions that have very high interaction, one-on-one interaction, are the ones that have lost the biggest market share. That you've seen the biggest decline in those areas. Whereas grocery stores, managers, warehouse managers, IT specialists, they've seen a huge increase in 2020. So there's all sorts of new jobs that have also come out of this crisis. There are a whole new set of jobs that have related to temperature checkers and contact tracers and things of that nature. So there's a lot of movement when you talk about what this pandemic has done outside of just creating these unemployment. But we're not here to talk specifically about unemployment. We're here to talk about how you're going to attract these quality talent people that may be out there through no fault of their own. So you want to talk about, thinking differently. And we're going to talk about that first part of the pie right now. So when you talk about the pie and thinking differently, we want to talk about what the job market looks like. Before COVID, the job market was 90% candidate driven. And what that means is that it's a candidate's market. They have enough jobs there are so many openings that were out there, and they could really pick and choose as they wanted. The expression is the talent picks you. And I think that you're still seeing that in the way that people are responding to jobs. And I think that that's one of those things that we have to start thinking differently about, is that it's not the same business as usual way to recruit a talent. You don't just throw up a job posting on Indeed or ZipRecruiter or something that you're using and hope they come to you. You have to start creating a culture that people are going to want to be a part of. And the way that you start interacting with those candidates and what that process looks like is a very big part of that. So, it's not just looking at this one-on-one and then you're going to have an interview with them, and then they're going to interview with some other people, and it's all just status quo. It's starting to create a talent community for your jobs, for your organizations. So you're not just looking at who do I want to hire right now for this job. You should be thinking in terms of who is going to be a good fit for this organization. Who am I going to need for the future that's going to make this work for everybody, and who is going to, what kind of roles do we typically have open? What are the skill sets that have to do with that? So you're looking at the bigger picture. One of the biggest challenges that the market has seen pre-COVID has been, looking at this concept of ghosting. And we're going to look a little bit at it differently, but there's all these terms out in the market that actually used to be related strictly to dating, which is kind of interesting. But that's really where that term started, was you would ghost somebody that you were dating. So you basically would go out on a date with them and you didn't like them, but you didn't really want to say that you didn't like them. And so you just sort of let them linger out there and you never called them back. Now you're seeing that same term, that ghosting, applied to the job market, and it comes at all phases of that recruitment process. So you're seeing that at, when you call the candidates the first time and they never call you back, and you're like, you sent your resume to me, why are you not even calling me back? Or they come in for an interview, the interview seems to go well, they seem engaged and excited about it, you invite them in for a second interview and they never call you back. And you're like, I don't understand what happened here. Things seem to be going so well, and they just never call you back. Or you offer them the job and they accept the job and then they never show up. Or they take the job and they will show up for a week and then they disappear. So we see this ghosting habit happen in all different phases of the recruiting process. Our goal as business leaders is to start engaging with these candidates differently. Oftentimes when you bring a new person on board, you give them a lot of love and attention that first week or so that you bring them in, and then you sort of send them on their merry way to figure things out and do their job. But we're finding that employees that tend to stay and be most successful are employees that we have engaged with for a minimum of 3 to 6 months after the hiring process. So again, we're trying to avoid the ghosting process that starts with the recruiting process, but doesn't really end there. You know, one of the statistics I read not so recently was 77% of candidates are willing to accept an offer that's 5% less of what their expected offer was, the compensation they were looking for, if they had a really good impression in the hiring process. So again, it reflects this idea that if we are engaging them from the jump in a manner that makes them feel like they are wanted and that this is a place that they could see themselves working, we're going to see a different result from that ghosting. So this kind of talks a little bit about the talent communities that I just referenced. So your talent community is more than just the pipeline of candidates that you may have built or that you've been thinking of. It's keeping tabs on those maybe second or third tier candidates that you really liked in a process that maybe just didn't have enough experience for the senior role, but you think might be a good 3, maybe a software engineer 3, let's use that as an example, or an accountant 1, 2, or 3. And, you know, you found someone, you really, really liked them, but they didn't quite have the knowledge and skill set yet for that job, but you really, really liked them. Keeping in touch with them, building that relationship with them, touching base with them occasionally, even if you don't have the role available, but you know that they're going to be a good fit for your organization, they've got all the other things, then that's going to be really important. You know, staying in touch with them, keeping in touch with candidates that you know, maybe took a different job but you really liked, individuals who may have left your organization for, you know, positive reasons, right? They wanted to go you know, spend time with their families, or they were going back to school, or, you know, candidates that you didn't have performance issues with maybe per se, but, you know, individuals that are former employees that you think either know a lot of people that may have a big network, good people to keep in touch with after they leave your organization. And if they have a really great skill set, always important to talk with them and keep them as well. So building this talent community to make it made up of more than just individuals that you've sought their resume online. Those are passive job seekers. You have to get a little bit more creative now. You have to start thinking about who is in these jobs and how do I find them while they're in the jobs. Again, COVID has changed this a little bit because there are a lot of people with a lot of talent that are out of work through no fault of their own, given the financial challenges that their organizations may have had. But again, you're looking to get the best of the best. And if you're going to go out there, you want to make sure that you are getting as many of them as possible through through actively seeking them. So that would mean something like, you know, seeking them and making relationships with people on LinkedIn, reaching out to them. Hey, it looks like you've got a good skill set. Would you be interested in other experiences? It's kind of an awkward thing to do. You're reaching out to someone you've never spoken to before, but it's a great thing to do. You can do that on Indeed. You can also reach out proactively to individuals that may have just left their resume up there. You don't know if they've been active, but they have a good skill set. It's important to build that talent community. The other really important part is the candidate experience. So how do they feel during their recruitment process? You know, do they feel like it's organized? Do they feel like they're welcome? Do they feel like it's not like running the gauntlet, right? Where you have 18 interviews and they're still not getting information about how they're doing or when you will be making a decision. You know, those factors play a part in whether or not they want to continue on in the process with you. So you want to be sure that you are communicating regularly with them if you have identified a candidate. Even if you don't have an answer yet, hey, Sally, we have 3 more interviews to get through. So we want to be sure that, you know, we're still looking at you. We're still interested. We're almost done with this part of the process, especially if you interviewed them early on in the process. So keeping in touch with them regularly and not being what is commonly referred to in recruiting circles as a black hole. You definitely don't want to be that black hole where they sent their resume in and they never got a response. You know, sending a response to every candidate that applies is very important because they want to know that, again, what kind of company would I be working for? And that has become very, very important for candidates out there right now, especially in the less experienced and younger demographic. It's there is a lot of emphasis in that demographic about the kind of company that they're working for. So it's important that they start experiencing that and understanding it right off the bat with you, because this is your chance to shine as an organization. The onboarding process, I talked to you a little bit about that briefly a couple slides ago. The important thing here again is making sure that you're not abandoning them. 15% of organizations, I guess I should say only 15% of organizations extend their onboarding past 6 months. They just sort of get you on your way in those first 2 weeks, and then they let you go and do what you need to do. The ones that are most successful are having constant check-ins with these new hires. A month in, they're talking about, okay, how are you feeling about, your decision to come here? What holes are you seeing in terms of your training process and things that you'd like to see? Another good thing is, we would like to start talking about your career development. Have you experienced any contact with other departments that you think you might be interested in? So again, investing in them long-term, making sure that they know that the onboarding is not just about, here, fill out your paperwork, watch a film, and I'll see you later. Go do your job. We had lunch for you for the first week and that's all. Having that ongoing onboarding experience is going to make a big difference when you talk about what that long-term engagement looks like. So let's talk a little bit about engagement, the second piece of the pie. Really, really important facet to keeping and retaining your employees. So I want to talk, I like this little graphic because he really could be anybody. He's kind of a crazy little graphic, but I think what I like about this is that culture often is overlooked in terms of how important it is. What is the impact of your culture? And oftentimes what you really think your culture is and what it actually is are two very different things. So when you think about defining what your culture is and you're not sure what it is, if someone asks you what your culture is and you can tell them about 2 sentences, oftentimes I wonder, are you still in touch with your culture? Because your culture is really what happens when you're not around, when the boss is not around, what's going on behind the scenes. So everyone has those employees that, knows everything, right? They've been with the organization for a long time. And when you start changing things in the culture, you change processes, you change philosophies, you change mission statements, anything like that. Those cultural influencers is what I call them. They have a very strong stake in keeping things the way that they are because they like the way things are. So they're the ones that are leading that charge. You have to identify who those cultural influencers are and make sure that if you're coming out there with a new change of your culture and you are trying to shift it for the better, or you're making process improvements or things like that, way before you start rolling those things out, the first thing you should be doing is really thinking about and identifying both what your culture is, what it should be to continue to grow your organization, because you don't want it to stay flat and the same. It should be evolving as your business is evolving. And then you also want to identify who those culture influencers are. So a good way to look at it is when you think about, you go to a fine dining restaurant, right? And you see all the linen and the beautiful crystal glasses and the shiny silverware and everything else. And you're just like, oh, it's so gorgeous. But who's running that show? It's everybody in the back of the kitchen. The back of the house is the one that are putting the food on the plates. They're making sure it's timed right. They're making sure that the drinks are getting to the table, the food hasn't been dropped on the floor, all of those small things. So that is your culture. The back of the house, in my analogy, is the culture. All the things that go on behind the scenes. So you've got, those influencers in your group. If you're like, well, we're going to start doing it this way. And they say things like, I know that this is the new way that we've been talking about doing it, but do it this way because this is how things get done. Trust me, this is how it's going to happen. Those influencers, if you cannot get them to buy into these changes, they're just going to wait you out. That culture change will never happen. They can wait it out. And that culture will swallow your strategy. So and that's where my little graphic comes in. He's a little Pac-Man. But you have to do more than just make a change and communicate it. You have to really drill down to make sure that you're covering off on all of these things, that your new strategy fits your culture, and that you have made strategic design steps to make sure that you are getting the right people on board at the ground level. And so that's why I'm a very big proponent of when you are creating changes and task forces and teams and things like that, you really need a cross section of different groups with different information. So they're all coming at it with a different perspective. Somebody who's on the floor, I'll use the analogy of a restaurant, they're going to be in a different mindset than someone who works in the back, than a busser maybe, or the marketing department, or the driver that takes the to-goes out. So you really have to make sure that you have thought leadership at every level, so you really can make the change stick. Because again, your culture can just swallow your amazing strategy and nothing will happen, and then you end up being very static. So it can be challenging as an organization to try and find a way to make that work. So finding out and identifying who those influencers are and bringing them into your strategy is a really great way to make sure that your changes are impactful and that you can accomplish them. So, which leads me to my next slide, which is, there we go, sorry about that. The final piece of the pie, which is retention. This is the hardest piece, right? This is the piece where you have put all this time, effort, and energy into getting the right talent. You've developed the talent. You've invested time, effort, and energy into these individuals, and now you want them to stay. So what's the best way to get them to stay? And I think the best way to make sure that you have buy-in and that you have people staying with your organization is to understand what motivates them, because everybody's motivated a little differently. So you can't go around and ask, so what's your motivation, Bob? No, but you can get a sense of how these different generations work, what's most important to them, and then focusing on how to harness that talent. Because when you're talking about, keeping things status quo, we can't think like that anymore. We have to have an ever-evolving, very agile workplace. Even if we have our traditions that are in our organizations and things that are their values that we hold fast to in each of our organizations, because they're important and they're integral to making it a successful organization, it doesn't mean that we can't evolve our work strategies and the way that we apply those strategies to our individuals. Because you can see on this chart here that I'm sharing that everybody, if you have a different upbringing and you have a different perspective on what's important to you, that's going to craft your culture, which we were just talking about is a major component to your engagement of your individuals. So you can't treat everybody the same in terms of the way that you're crafting your benefits or your vacation policies. And you have to be thinking broader. You have to shake things up. And I'm going to talk about disruption again here in just a second. But when you look at this chart, people in the first two categories, the traditionalists and the boomers, have a very regimented way of approaching work. It was always climbing the ladder, right? So you were trying to get into, the next job, and then the next job, and then the next job. And we're seeing with the next three generations, Gen X, Millennial, and Gen 2020, they don't look at success and achievement at work in a lateral movement like that. It's more of a spider web where they're trying to gain knowledge and they're trying to look at different look at different skill sets and having exposure to different capabilities and different responsibilities and things like that. So they're looking at their overall career growth in a very different way that the first two categories there, traditionalists and boomers, have done. So it's definitely one of those things that you really need to adjust, because if your company has is having trouble capturing the new talent, I would say, I want to know what that work-life balance looks like. What are you doing to address some of these smaller things that are very important to the Gen X, the Millennial, and the Gen 2020. They like to travel. They like lots of mini recognitions, like gift cards and extra days off, and they want to be able to go and work flexible. And right now with COVID, this is their sweet spot. They've been saying all along in the job market for the past I would say 3 to 5 years, they've been saying, we don't have to work in the office to be productive. Turns out they're right? So we're all working remotely and everybody is productive right now. So, well, not everybody, but So, when you talk about the things that are, what this life cycle looks like for these individuals in each demographic, there is a very different approach. Oftentimes 401k investing and things of that nature doesn't resonate with the Gen 2020 and the millennial group. They just aren't as interested in that, but they like days off, and they expect to change jobs a lot. So if you have a PTO program that they have to be there for 10 years to get 2 extra days, that's not going to appeal to them. They feel like they're going to switch jobs. So they're trying to learn everything and they want to be challenged and those kinds of things. So, but then, at the other end of the traditionals, the boomers, the individuals that have a lot of experience and are bringing that to your work groups, I think that, again, we want to be sure that we've got flexible benefits that address their needs as well. So again, it's creating an organization that is agile, that you can stay away from getting stuck into only one way of looking at things, and finding the best strategy for your organization, big or small, to sort of not only attract that best talent, but also make them stay. Because again, in the end, it costs a lot of money if they leave after you've invested time, effort, and energy into them. It's a soft, what's the word that I would like there? It's a soft loss, I guess, because you don't have anything specific to it, but you do want to make sure that you're not experiencing that loss over and over again, because it not only hurts your productivity and morale if there's a lot of turnover, but it also is costly, when it comes down to it. All right, so let's talk about what I was talking about with disruption. So, when your business is changing, right? Your margins get a little bit tighter, sales get a little bit harder, you're trying to gain more and more effort on your return, and you're having to put more effort in to get that same return. Maybe there's more competition in your area, those kinds of things. So what you need to do is you need to think about disruption as a positive thing. You don't need to wait for something to go really bad to start up and start thinking differently, being progressive in the way that you're looking at things. So I like this S-curve because it shows you how an organization starts off and it's very disruptive, right? When you first start out, you've got a lot going on. You've got all sorts of changes are happening, and you've got a lot of growth, and it's super hectic, and there's all sorts of stuff going on. And then things level out a little bit. So there's a calm, right? So you're just like, oh, okay, things seem to be going good. But what you want is that new rise. You want that curve to happen again. But in order to get that curve to happen again, you need to break out of that routine. You need to be thinking either strategically as a business, or you need to be looking at your internal infrastructure and saying, okay, what do we need to do? We want to break those routine thinking to get better, to get larger. And I know that, oftentimes people are like, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But I do think that the companies that you see that are able to withstand ups and downs have that internal disruption mindset to say, okay, we're doing really great. What's our next big disruption that we're going to do? What are we going to do? And again, you're not looking to hurt your business. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you need to find a way to innovate. You need to find a way to break out of that kind of static thinking, because while that is a good mindset for maintenance mode in a business, and I think that, sometimes it's good to be conservative and have that maintenance mode, eventually you're going to want to grow again. And so in order to grow successfully, you need to make sure that you have that infrastructure set up internally. So I think it's a great way of thinking. So oftentimes when I do this seminar, I usually include a clip from this movie that I think is really, really great. So I'm going to tell you about the clip here really quickly, and then we're going to open up for questions. But there's this movie called Moneyball, and it's with Brad Pitt. And the movie is basically about how this general manager of the Oakland A's innovated the way that he ran this baseball team. He stepped away from the traditional thinking of how baseball teams should be run and how they should be managed. And he like started this crazy trend, and the whole time people were saying, no, you can't do it. No, this is a bad idea. And I think the most telling scene of the movie, well, not the most telling scene, but the one I like the most that applies to what we're talking about here with recruitment, engagement, and retention is he's sitting down with all of his recruiters who have been doing this for the longest time, and they all are talking about the same way to go about recruiting. And he has this conversation with them that basically talks about, guess what? We can't do it the old way. We don't have the ability. We can't compete with the IBMs of the world and in his analogy, it's the Boston Red Sox, but we can't, the giant firms, we can't compete with them. So how do we make ourselves attractive? What are we going to do differently? And it's really amazing. The movie talks so much about creating a new way for your business. And it was, obviously it's a movie, they made a movie out of it, so it's super successful, but it involved a lot of risk. It involved a lot of pushback, and his dedication to the plan, to the program, was, very admirable, I think. So anyway, I highly recommend it. It's about a quarter of the way into the movie, and it really, I think, solidifies some of the stuff that we've been talking about today with looking at the problem differently. Are we even looking at the problem? We can't address the problem if we can't identify it. So what is the problem that's preventing you from doing the best recruiting you can, doing the best engaging you can, doing the best retention you can? If we're not looking at the problem, we can't resolve it. So oftentimes it takes some self-reflection and some self-awareness. What is our culture saying? What can we do here? So I think we can all solve these problems for ourselves, but we have to make sure that we're looking at these problems productively. So that is the end of my presentation. I am here to answer questions, and Reza is here also to answer questions about CoAdvantage. This is our pictures and our contact information, and Katie has that if she needs it. This is just some information on CoAdvantage. As Reza mentioned, we do a lot to manage, help manage small and mid-sized businesses. One of the things I like to include here is you can see a lot of our webinars here on this website at CoAdvantage /webinars. But it's a great place to see past webinars that we have done, and it's a great it's a great way to bring your business to the next level sometimes. But I'm here to answer any questions, as Reza is as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to make sure my mic is unmuted this time. I apologize for that.
That's okay.
At this time, feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A function, or you can raise your hand and speak directly into your mic. I did receive a question about the presentation material, so if you would like to gain access to the presentation material, please take our course evaluation. That link is in the chat. If you happen to lose the link, you can always email us at askus@lgt-cpa.com. Would you like to speak a little bit about what CoAdvantage does directly with your HR resources?
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, we are number 5 or 6, depending on the ranking and the year, top PEOs nationwide. This is what we do. Our HR department, people like Justine, and we have a fully staffed HR team here in Dallas, Fort Worth area, that all they do every day, they help clients with things like this. So one of the main differences that we have with many other PEOs or organizations in our industry is that we are a proactive HR company. What it means is that when you work with us, we actively meet with the business owners or decision makers or whoever is involved in from your HR department. learn about your current basically setup, understand what you want to do moving forward. And huge chunk of what we do basically relates to these three topics: recruiting, retention, and employees engagement, because this is the vehicle from going from point A to point B or point B to point C. Doesn't matter if you're outsourcing, if you are basically increasing or shrinking your business. There are solutions that our experts like Justine can help you accomplish.
And I'll add to that too. So basically, that is what I do all day long. So I have a book of, right now, I think I have about 43 clients, and pre-COVID, so I'm not doing it right now, but typically I would spend almost 90% of my time out of the office and at my client sites. So I go, I visit with them, we talk about projects that we're working on, we talk about trainings that they want to do, we talk about employee issues they may be having. So my job is to partner with the business leaders in those organizations, get to know their businesses. So when they call me, I know why it's a big deal that Bob's sleeping underneath his desk again. I know why, Sally not doing her job in that particular area is a big deal because it affects A, B, or C. So my job is to be integral into the business. So as Reza said, we don't just sit behind the desk and hope for you to call us in and just answer everything by email. We have very strong, interactive, proactive relationships with our clients. I know all my clients, their personal info and stuff because we've all been working together for so long, and so when something's going on, I know I can help them because I know what that past history and that business continuity looks like.
Awesome, thank you. So we do have a couple of questions now. What is the biggest challenge you see with small and mid-sized businesses outside of revenue loss and employee engagement during COVID? Is there any other issues you see that is a big concern?
I think the biggest challenges that I'm seeing these small to medium-sized businesses struggle with is all of the changing regulations that are coming out right now with COVID. It seems like every week they have new guidelines that are coming out as it relates to the FFCRA, or certain states have different leave laws that are going into effect, and how that affects the businesses. Business owners just don't know, is this on me? Do I know about this? Should I be following this? I just don't understand. So I do think that that is one of the biggest challenges right now, is keeping up with those laws and knowing if they impact you at all. And that's something that I spend, I think right now, probably 50% of my day on, is I have calls from my clients asking about, this new guideline came out, and is it me? Do I have to do it? So when something new comes out, so I'll give you an example. Here in Colorado, we have a brand new law that got signed into law in the end of July. So it's this Health and Welfare Act law here in Colorado, which is basically going to be mirroring some of the federal laws starting in January 1. I have a lot of clients that I sent the information out to because it hasn't really been publicized very well. So we sent the information out to our clients to make sure they're well informed about it. And then, we're probably going to do some kind of mini webinar to make sure that everyone's educated on it, because it's overwhelming and you're trying to run your business. You're trying to build your revenue. You don't need to be worrying about that. You need a partner that can track all that for you, because I swear every week something new comes out. They just came out with new DOL guidelines about the FFCRA that are repealing some guidelines that they just put out at the end of August. So it gets a little tricky. So that's part of what our partnership looks like, is to be your partner there and to help you get around that.
Awesome. I think it's really hard in today's times. You just have to constantly be on your toes, right?
It is. It's tricky.
And then this is just a general question for CoAdvantage. So how do you guys compare with Paychex, PEO, Insperity, and ADP? Like, what is the difference between you versus them?
Great question again. So I worked for ADP and Insperity, so I know them very well. Nothing bad. I don't like to talk bad about the competition, but one of the reasons I joined CoAdvantage is that my first question to my current boss was, okay, how flexible are we in offering the services? Because when I was with Insperity, one of the challenges I had working with clients was that almost all the services Insperity offers is in like a package or a sandbox that we used to offer to the clients and say whether or not you use all these services, we are charging you for them. The second issue was the cost structure. For example, ADP, they charge a percentage of a payroll. If you're a sales organization, the more your salespeople make, the more ADP makes. So that was the second question that I really didn't like about ADP or Insperity. I wanted that out of my basically clients. So, and the third reason that I joined CoAdvantage was the service level, what we are talking about today. So these people like Justine, that help clients every day, day in and day out with proactive HR, strategic and proactive HR agenda. So CoAdvantage has all of them. So the way they charge their invoices is per employee per month versus percentage of a payroll. Very transparent, not trying to hide admin fee the way some of the bigger companies are doing it. Very transparent. Cost structure is much better, much more reasonable. And basically the service, I would say these are the top three differences between us, Insperity. I haven't experienced Paychex PEO, but I don't know, I can't talk about them, but ADP Total Source and Insperity that I experienced working with them. And these three are the top reasons that I decided to join CoAdvantage.
Great. And then we have one more question. So what new regulations are coming out in the year 2021 in regards to HR, if there are any?
Oh, there's always more regulations. Are you kidding? There's always some kind of rule. It's hard to say right now. It depends a little bit on where your business is located. So different states have different things that are happening with each of them with, starting in the 2021. There are some recent shifts in Texas with some of the gun laws, with some of the COVID laws. There's also some recent shifts with wage and hour. So there's always going to be something that comes up at the beginning of the year with all these different federal and state legislative bodies is what I'm going to call them, because it all depends on how quickly it gets pushed through. There's a lot of ban the box legislation going on right now in a lot of states, which again, it depends on whether or not it gets through. Paid leave is a very big one that's on a lot of the dockets right now. So I don't know specifically off the top of my head for which state this individual may be asking about. I'm assuming it's probably Texas, but they may have locations in other states as well. So I could definitely drill down and be more specific if I knew what locations they were referring to.
Do you have a good reference source that you recommend people look at for regulations?
The reference sources that I use are all HR related. And so I get, I'm on a couple law firms and I'm on the Department of Labor, and I'm on a couple other networking shifts that I get information from regularly. One of the big ones that I use that not everybody uses is it's NAPIO, which is the National PEO organization, and they have a lot of information about what's going on in all states, because PEOs function in all states, and they have a whole group of people that are in Washington lobbying and things like that. So I use that one as well because they are very on top of a lot of stuff, because it's a big organization and it affects all of the PEOs, the ADPs and everybody, not just us. So I use them as well. So I use a variety of different law firms that I've got newsletters with. So not one specific location. I mean, I think being on your state Department of Labor is always a good thing because you're going to have newsletters that come out from them and news alerts and things like that. But There's not one location, I think, that has everything, unfortunately.
That would be too easy, right?
No, but that's why I kind of collect all my information for my clients, because it's just too hard, quite
Yeah,
honestly.
I agree. Yeah. Well, I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much, Justine and Reza, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to email us at askus@lgt-cpa.com. All right, well, y'all have a great afternoon. Thank you,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Thank you,
Thanks
guys.
for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Please make sure to follow our events page for more information. Link is in the description below, along with other important links, including our social media. If you want to see more of the Lane Gorman-Trubet Harvesting the Future webinar series, subscribe below and hit the bell icon for notifications.